Okay, so I think we'll get started. Good morning. I'm Melinda Phillips, Associate Professor of English here at Lawrence Technological University, and I'd like to begin by extending a warm welcome to you all. I hope the day's panels, the keynote tonight, and tomorrow's That Camp are stimulating, informative, provocative, and practical, and that you leave LTU with the tools and collaborations necessary to plan, develop, and complete DH projects. Let me say off the bat that I am new to the digital humanities. I first heard the term digital humanities a couple of years ago at a lecture by Ray Siemens, and I was captivated, not just because of what computers can do for me as a scholar, but of what computers can do for us as teachers. And I think that all the professors and professionals in this room can agree that as humanists, our work is not only to reflect on the human condition in a sustained way, but also to transmit our human cultural heritage to our students and to the public. We want our students and the public to love and pay attention to the cultural artifacts that we love. And let's face it, there are so many ways now to experience a cultural artifact. And digital technology is part of the human condition. It is bound up with the human condition. Digital technology itself is worthy of study as a phenomenon that is shaping the way we think about, communicate with, and experience the world and each other. Now, when I returned from this conference 2 years ago, I shared my excitement with my colleagues and was asked the now perennial question, what is the digital humanities? For me, the fact that it can't be labeled, that it is an evolving discipline, that we are inventing it as we are doing it, is really exciting. Now, what I like about DH is that it's open, it's collaborative, and it's civic-minded. And for the DHer, and I'm quoting Lisa Spiro here, information is not a commodity to be controlled, but a social good to be shared and reused. The digital humanities makes the walls of our educational and heritage institutions permeable. We are one classroom. And technology is evolving so rapidly, we cannot go it alone. We need each other. Which leads me to Detroit, the theme of our conference, and the theme of this panel. When I was traveling to that conference where Ray Siemens was speaking, I shared a van with another participant. And this is a true story. He asked me where I was from, and when I answered Detroit, he said, "I'm so sorry." And I said, "Excuse me, Detroit is my home, and I really like it." So if you're going to tweet anything from this conference, please tweet this. Stop dissing Detroit. Okay, we have fantastic music, art, literary culture, museums and galleries, restaurants, breweries. We've got sports teams, river walks, hiking trails, parks, incredible diversity. Our history from the Underground Railroad to its manufacturing history is fascinating. You cannot live in the Detroit area, especially as an educator, and not feel touched by its troubles and feel responsible for its renewal. So we've gathered these panelists here together today, archivists from Detroit's premier heritage institutions to reflect on what has been done in regards to digital humanities projects at their institutions and what needs to be done. This panel is a call to action. Let's get involved in preserving and disseminating the rich cultural heritage of our city. Now, I would be terribly remiss if I did not thank a few people without whom this gathering would not have been possible. And if you could please stand when I say your name. First of all, Dr. Zhao Ping Moore. Dr. Moore is the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and she has supported me and my passion for the digital humanities ever since I learned about it. And because of her backing, the College of Arts and Sciences funded this conference. So I cannot thank you enough. Nathan Kelber. Nathan? Nathan is a graduate student at the University of Maryland, and how serendipitous it was after this conference where I saw Ray Siemens that I would, by chance, meet his wife who was visiting this campus, and it turned out that her husband is studying the digital humanities at the University of Maryland. Of course, I jumped on that. Really? Wow. So we got to talking, and now he is teaching here, and we're very, very lucky to have him. I'd also like to thank Assistant Professor of Mathematics and Computer Science, Lior Shamir. Lior? Lior has been doing digital humanities work for a while now, and I have to say that his enthusiasm for this event, and also Nathan Kelber's and Zhao Ping Moore's, has really carried me through the planning process. So really appreciate it. So without further delay, let's get started. So our first speaker today is Maria Ketcham. And Maria Ketcham, I'm going to take this out here. Okay. Maria Ketcham is a native Detroiter and has been with the Detroit Institute of Arts for about 10 years, first as a reference librarian, now as department head of the Research Library and Archives. She is on the board of DALNet, the Detroit Area Library Network Consortium, and has been for the past 8 years. Before working for the DIA, Maria worked as an archivist for Ford Motor Company. She has a BFA in photography and a Master's of Library and Information Science from Wayne State University, and she is also a certified archivist. So we'll have questions after everyone speaks. Okay? So Maria? Yes. So are you on the desktop then? Okay.
Thank you all for allowing me to come and speak about the DIA and our research library and archives. I'm honored to be part of Lawrence Tech's first Digital Humanities Conference and being part of this illustrious panel of colleagues. So you may know this already. Oh, actually, I'll just give a brief overview of my talk. I'm going to tell a little bit about our museum, the relationship between the library and the museum, and finally about some projects that we're considering and that perhaps the students here can help us with. You may know this already, but our museum is the 6th largest art museum in America, with over 60,000 art objects documenting evidence of human creativity from all periods of time and from all geographic locations. Even with the additional galleries we gained with our recent renovation project, we still can only display about 12% of our holdings at any one time. Our museum reaches our audience in several ways, including in person while visiting the museum, online through our website and our social media sites, and through our connections and collaborations with the community. Revitalize, Reinterpret, Reinstall is the title of the white paper our museum director wrote in 2007, outlining the roadmap for how he envisioned the reinterpretation of our newly reinstalled galleries. The DIA has a history of innovating how artwork is displayed in museums, Back in 1927, when the doors opened to our newly constructed building on Woodward Avenue, our director, William Valentiner, started the museum off on a new path. Valentiner was a highly regarded art historian in his career in Germany, and who was mentored by another well-respected art historian, William Bode. At that time, museum galleries were traditionally arranged by type of artwork and artist. Audiences in 1927 were viewing artwork for the first time displayed in a new way to include arrangement by culture and time period. This allowed the viewer to make connections about the methods and values of different societies. This revolutionized how collections were displayed and became the standards for a museum at the time. And I have a letter here. This is from our archives. This is from the William Valentiner papers. I'm sorry, I thought it would be larger, but towards the end there, he's describing, this is a letter to Mr. Lee Simonson, Creative Art, New York City, and at the end of the letter, he talks about how he started this idea experimenting when he was at the Metropolitan Museum in 1908, where he was given an opportunity to try this new arrangement of the artwork. And then by the time he came to Detroit, he was able to realize this for the entire museum. And part of the reason that I also picked this letter too, knowing that Dina would be here, is that the beginning of the letter starts out talking about the collection of Mr. Edsel Ford, and then goes into the idea that where his father, Henry Ford, was starting this new American Village Museum, and how Valentiner thought it was a terrible idea. So Valentiner, as brilliant as he was not always right about everything. And Greenfield Village is obviously a destination for people all over the world to this day. So in the early 2000s, we embarked on a major renovation, and while we were rethinking the physical building, we were also rethinking how to present the artwork within the museum. And we came up with a new interpretive strategy that we use today. Our main goal is to be visitor-centered, to expand our audience and to enhance their experience. The way we use our artwork, how we interpret it, use our big idea thematic model, and how we compose our labels towards a certain style of interpretation has brought a lot of attention to the way we do things at our museum. Since our reopening, we've received cheers and jeers for the way we do things. But in the end, our focus is always the audience, with a singular mission to help people find personal meaning in art. We also have an evaluation process in place that ensures that we keep on track with what our audience expects. So from the time that the new building opened in 1927 to now, there's a common thread that runs through how the presentation of the artwork happens. And where earlier the presentation model was geared more towards art historians, to now where we take a more inclusive approach, is that research is at the core of everything we do. The Research Library and Archives houses decades, sometimes centuries worth of evidence, writings, and scholarship that tells the story behind the artwork in the museum. The museum library, we have about 190,000 volumes, and our earliest piece in our collection dates from the 15th century. Our department is also charged with caring for and making accessible materials of enduring historic value that document the history and activities of the museum over time. Ongoing scholarly research is at the core of everything we do. Without it, we lose the museum's guarantee of authenticity and value to the community. Our authenticity and value resides in the quality of the collection and the information related to it. So as you see, there are lots of aspects of how people do research, who does research, for acquisitions, exhibitions, continuing research, conservation, interpretation. We mainly have an internal audience, that being our curators, our learning and interpretation staff, our research scientists, but we also get several outside scholars that visit us from all over the world. And recently, last month, we had someone from France, someone from Italy, a few people from around the States. We're expecting someone next month who's coming all the way from New Zealand. And the way they get to us is we've been slowly trying to make our what we have available about our collections online. It's slow going, but it's slowly getting out there, and it's reaching people, and they're coming to us. And eventually, one day we'll hopefully save people a trip so they can access our materials pretty much on demand. This is actually an image of our card catalog in our reading room that we still use. When we automated our library, not everything made it into the system, so we slowly are trying to remedy this. So we've had some challenges in our library. For as much as we're wanting to move forward, are aware of technology that will help us create more access to our collections, there are some things holding us back, and I'm sure this is true of many institutions in this area. We don't have the staff. Sometimes we don't have the resources, or in terms of the technology or the software programs, or even the people power to do what needs to be done. But we're very fortunate at the DIA Research Library. We're part of the DALNet Consortium, which helps us with our online catalog system that we would never be able to do as a standalone library. And we also have long-standing relationships with local universities, so that we have student interns and practicum students that are able to help us. So it benefits us in that it helps us get some of the work done that we need, but also we want it to also be meaningful to the student and make sure that we're giving them work that will help them along in their studies and eventually in their professional career. Some view libraries as a system to manage books. While that's partly true, we also do much more. We manage information in all kinds of formats. We acquire and create access to the analog, the digital surrogate, and the born digital. Access can mean several different things. In the library field, we've been early adopters of technology in organizing information in the forms of encoding schemas, metadata schemas, and content standards. While we've moved away somewhat from the card catalog to online catalogs and web-based interfaces, we're still struggling to be where people are. For so long, we were used to people coming directly to us for information, and now there's so much out there on the internet that students in school will very likely start with a Google search before they come to the library's website. So where we differ from most libraries is that as a special library, the materials we collect are usually not found in other libraries. Our library in general is tailored to acquire and support research on our art collections. And while there might be some overlap in our collection with university libraries and other art museums, we're able to pull numbers to show that about 20% of our collection is rare, and where 3% is unique to our institution. And these numbers are comparisons of libraries, are based on comparisons of libraries worldwide. These unique items are usually materials that we create in the museum as part of our daily activities. So they're usually archival in nature, include processed archival collections, sound recordings, and artist vertical files. So these are the types of things that we have a strong interest in with the museum and the library. Again, to keep with our mission, to help people find personal meaning in art, to create more open access to our collections, not just in the library, but of course in the museum. As I mentioned before, only 12% of our collection is viewable physically within the museum. So we've been working diligently on this fourth bullet point, the TMS enhancement. TMS is our catalog for our artwork in the museum. And right now we're working on creating a web interface that will allow someone who's searching our website to see what kind of things we have in the collection. Right now, if you go to our website and look for things in our collection, artwork in our collection, you can go to the website and go under the collections page or even search the collection. But even really when you get here, while it might seem like we have a lot, we have about only, I can't spell. We really only have about 7,000 pieces up. So we're in the process of updating TMS, of making more web access to the materials, and it's a collaborative effort. It's not just the registrar's department that manages the physical collection, but also with curatorial to make sure that the information that we're presenting is correct. And we also have a role in the library with being involved with the TMS enhancement in that they're looking at the library perspective of how to mark up the records to make sure that things are searchable. One of the other, pie-in-the-sky type goals we have is to digitize our archival collection. And I look at the Archives of American Art as how I envision what we would like to do. And ironically, Archives of American Art started in Detroit back in the 50s and was at the DIA for a very long time, up until about the 70s when we weren't able to manage the collection anymore. And so now today, Archives of American Art is part of the Smithsonian Institution, but they've taken on this digitization project where you can go into each folder and view, just as if you were sitting in an archive having a research appointment, flipping through the different archival material that's available. And we've been trying to do this. We've been initiating a project to digitize the Valentiner papers. It's a slow process for us. The physical scanning takes some time, going back and adding the metadata, deciding how much metadata to use. As with this collection, a lot of material is handwritten and can't go through the OCR process. Do you transcribe? We have to look at what we can do and balance what we can do with trying to have it. To me, this is what we would eventually like our archival collections to how we would like them to be presented. And then another website that I like is the Peacock Room site that Dina happened to be involved with when she was at Wayne State. And so the Peacock Room site uses an open source program called Omeka, and it's a way to, simply put, to browse the collections, but it also allows you the capability of using whatever is in that system and rearranging it to make different exhibitions or certain types of learning materials and such. So in a nutshell, that's sort of where we're at with the museum and different projects that we're considering, and look forward to collaborating with your students. Thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Bob Smith, and Robert Smith is the Vice President of Education and Exhibitions at the Charles H. Wright Museum. His most recent accomplishments at the Charles H. Wright Museum include directing the development of the Inspiring Minds exhibition, African American Scientists and Inventors, a $600,000 project to document the Underground Railroad, and the Marching Toward Justice exhibition, a permanent installation at the Damon J. Keith Law Center at Wayne State University Law School. And he began his career as a media specialist at Highland Park Community College in Highland Park, Michigan. So welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Melinda, and I certainly want to thank you for bringing us all together. Two of my colleagues are supposed to be here. I think I see Jennifer up there, Jennifer Evans, who is our special project coordinator at the museum and works on a lot of our technology projects, and Lanisha Delabartoleben, who's up there, and I may be calling on them to provide some information if I forget it. So they are key parts of the reason why we have been somewhat successful in terms of digital technologies. Let me first say that I'm going to kind of speak for the old guys. How many here in this audience have used an ectographic projector? Okay. Okay. Well, that kind of tells the story, and I used an ectographic projector quite a bit. So, and the reason why I say that is because I was listening to the news the other day, and some tech executive said that he was retiring because he was 48 and he was too old to be in the technology business. Another comment I heard actually is at our job in a manager's meeting in which we brought in some presenters to talk about developing some apps for the museum, and they were relatively older men. And so one of the persons at the museum said that, well, they're too old to be sort of innovative. So anyway, I'm going to speak for the old guys. And the reason why I say that is because when I was a graduate student, and my background is instructional technology, and I was working on a project, some graduate projects that you had to complete before they will allow you to graduate. And one of the projects that I was working on was a multimedia presentation using the old ectographic projectors, in which you had 3 projectors, and these projectors were controlled by a system in which you would punch holes in these little tapes, and the tapes would run through the system and control the projectors. That dates me. And but one of the things is I was working on this project. I had about 300 or 400 slides that I was trying to go through and figure out. And so I said to myself, there must be a better way to sort of organize these slides and organize these visuals to produce these presentations. And sometimes things happen to you when you're young that never quite leaves you, and they stay with you. The other thing that happened when I was in graduate school is that I took a documentary film class, and we had to do a documentary film project. And one of the projects that I worked on was a documentary film where I took a book called The House of Bondage by Ernest Cole. And House of Bondage was about apartheid in South Africa. And I converted it into a slide presentation and a sort of a mini documentary. And I showed it in the class. And at that time, in 1971, no one had ever heard of apartheid. It was just a term that was never used. And it was the first time that many of the students in the class had heard the term apartheid. But these images were powerful images and had been snuck out of South Africa. And the book was published. And if you get a chance to get that book, you should see it. It's still a powerful book to read and to look at. But those two things happened to me when I was a graduate student, and they have never left me. And they have everything that I've done in terms of technology goes back to those two experiences in graduate school. And my presentation is going to kind of tell you why.
Looks like it's a shortcut, not the actual file. You have to with the machine.
Sure. Anyway, while that's being set up, I do want to talk about the Charles Wright Museum a little bit. The other thing, when I came in this morning, I met two gentlemen and introduced myself and indicated that I was from the Charles Wright Museum, and they had never been to the museum. And one of the things that I noticed as we travel around Detroit, that a lot of people still have not been to the largest African American museum in the world, that has the largest exhibition on African Americans in the world, still right here in Detroit. And certainly the DIA gets a lot of the attention about what's going on in the museum world in Detroit. But the Charles Wright Museum has been in the throes of significant budget reductions by the city for the last 4 or 5 years. And our budget has been sort of decimated. And so we have been trying to make the adjustment to continue to do great programming. And I think it's important to point out, when you see some of these projects that we're going to show today, is that we've done some of our best work in a period of great retrenchment in terms of budgets at the Charles H. Wright Museum. When I started working at the Charles H. Wright Museum 8 years ago, we had 65 full-time people on our staff. We now have about 35 to 40, it's a significant number of part-time people. But these projects that we're going to show today were done during that period of great retrenchment. And one of the reasons we sort of moved to the digital world was because I recognized 4 or 5 years ago that if we were going to continue to be successful, then we would have to increasingly rely on digital technologies to do that. And so one of the things that we did, that we came up with a strategy, a basic strategy, that one of the things that we wanted to do was to, going back to this thing that happened to me in graduate school, was how do you organize, how do you amass content to be able to repurpose it and use it, and to be able to provide it to all of your staff and your workers. The other thing that we wanted to do is how do you use that content not just to organize and store it, but how do you use it to publish out into the various digital display systems efficiently and economically. And also, how do you continue to update and expand that digital technology? And so one of the things that we started thinking about was some sort of content management system that we could install in the museum online and give our staff access to our curators, our special project people, and so forth. So, because basically one of the things that happens at museums is that, particularly African American museums and particularly history museums, is that you're really using sort of a body of knowledge, data. And when we do exhibits, particularly on African American history, there's a sort of a basic timeline, a basic history that we base most of our present products on. And a lot of the imagery, a lot of the resources are used. They're just used differently. So the idea is that normally the way curators and archivists and people like that work is that when they do projects, they work pretty much in silos. I mean, curators and people, the museum people can be pretty protective of their content and their ideas. And so one of the things that I wanted to do at the Charles Wright was to really get the team to work together and to take their content on their various projects and to always leave that content somewhere with the proper metadata on it so it could be accessed and used again. And so when we're dealing with history, we're dealing with usually people, places, sites, events, and organizations. And then we're also dealing with the actual digital assets and the resources, and we're also having to describe those resources as well as to access resources from various other historical repositories around the country. And that's pretty much how museum people work. And so our goal was to, first of all, try to build this content management system that could do all of these things. And we attempted to, with some of our grant money and project money, to really, as opposed to just creating an exhibit or creating the project, we took some of the money and we combined money from various grants and we put a pool of money together, about $75,000. And after a trial and error of trying to first initially build this system, we finally found, went to the American Museum Association and ran into a company that had the system that we wanted. And the name of the company was Magian Media. And if you go to their website, you can see some of the various projects that they've created around the world. They're actually located in Australia. And so they came to Detroit, we talked, and so we contracted them to work with us to develop a system that we would use to produce two significant projects at the museum. One was a major project on the Underground Railroad, and the other one was the Inspiring Minds exhibition, which we're going to show today. So essentially the way this map system works, this sort of, that we call it as a content management system, is that essentially what can happen is that our curators and archivists can be in their offices, and they can basically, through maps, they can then go into maps, put the information in, get into the system, and then upload all of their data, their images, their video, and so forth. And even once something is produced, like a media presentation, that's a package that can be put in. And after that, the next thing is that depending upon the system, that information can be published out to various display systems, to websites, to kiosks, to touch screens, and so forth. And basically in our galleries, we can then publish information out. And for example, one of the projects that we're working on, and I'm going to give some of you, I think I have it written down, if you have access to the internet. And this is the address if you want to go to it. It's ugrr.maps, MMAPS.Magian, MAGIAN. And so if you want to go to that, you can take a look at our new Underground Railroad site. When you get to it, the password is Wright, and the username is Wright, and the password is Wright, and that will get you into that website. It's not even public yet, so you're the first to look at it outside of our staff at the museum, if you want to take a look at it and sort of watch it while we go through this presentation. But the important thing is you look at that website is that the same content that's in the website, we can reformat it and we create it and we make it into touchscreen systems. And so we're taking basically the same content and just reusing it and representing it differently. And so this is just a picture of the website here. And I'm not going to talk very much about it. If you can go into it, it'll be launched in November, so you'll get a chance to actually use it. But if you want to use it before, you can just use that information to get access to it. And so we can use the information for all sorts of purposes. One of the things that we've done at the museum with the Underground Railroad content is we have history games with high school students that we use the same content that we pull from our content management system. The other major project that we worked on is the new Black Inventors and Science Galleries. I'm going to show you a video of that because image is worth 1,000 words. But in this exhibit, we have some major digital content display systems. We have a huge digital wall that we're going to show called the interactive wall. We have various kiosks on African American scientists, on contemporary scientists as well. And these are some of the kiosk screens. Now, basically, what we're proposing, or what we're saying is that one of the things that a small museum can do, we have a very small staff, we have a very small budget, but with that, by properly using the grant money and the resources that we have been able to leverage that and to create some very significant, innovative, and cutting-edge projects. And I'm going to show you some illustrations of some of those here right quick. This is the Inspiring Minds video, and it'll kind of give you a sense of what that's like.
I'm at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, which is the world's largest institution dedicated to the African American experience. And when you come in up the steps, you're greeted by this magnificent rotunda behind me, which creates this really unique acoustic, echoey sound. From there, you go on up the steps to their permanent exhibit, And Still We Rise, which is a journey through the African American experience of culture and history that spans all the way from the slave trade days on through the 21st century. They also have an extremely large temporary exhibit that rotates throughout the year, probably about 3 or 4 different per year. But we are here to see their latest permanent exhibit, Inspiring Minds, which challenges everyone to come up with their own great invention.
It really is for all ages.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of things in here for small children that we don't have in other areas of the museum. We have a lot of things that you can touch, which is awesome because in a history museum, there's often not a lot of things you can touch and engage with. And so the space is really designed to learn history, to learn science, but also to engage and play. The highlight of the exhibition space is the multimedia touch walk. What we're looking at here is the African American timeline, and there are 2 components to the timeline. The first one is the top bar, which gives some facts about African American history through the years, and so this is what's happening in 1968.
Right.
It's designed to give some context because the stars are actually about specific African American scientists and inventors.
Oh.
And so the idea is that when you're learning about the scientists and inventors, and you don't know what was happening in 1967, you can look at the timeline at the top to get some kind of context about what was going on in American history and world history that was important. And so we can go from the African American timeline to another content area on marine life.
Wow.
And the bubbles are all touchable.
Oh,
And so
neat.
when a child comes up and they touch one of the
Now, the
bubbles, you
important
get a
thing
fact
about
about the ocean. It might be about the ancient ocean. It might be about the ocean now. And within each of the bubbles, there's actually an activity that a child can do. So this is a puzzle. Some of them are quiz questions. Some of them are matching up a fish or something that is in the ocean.
So Jennifer, I would also think this would be really good for school groups to come and utilize this space.
It is. We have a lot of school groups that come in, and when we get here, we have an educator that's in the space that shows them how the room operates, and then they go and do a workshop that
Kind of gets their creative juices flowing.
Yeah, it kind of hits at another angle. So they get to do something with their hands, they get to create something.
Anyway, that's the Inspiring Minds. And the other project, which is something very dear to me personally, because I'm an avid history lover, and one of my great interests is the Civil War. And we had wanted to do a major exhibition on the Civil War, but we didn't have the money or the funding to do that, so we had a sort of a consolation prize. And there's a series in the New York Times where every week or so, scholars publish an article on the Civil War. And it's documenting the history of the Civil War up through 2015, when the Civil War ended in 1865. And so we decided at the museum that we would do the same thing, except we would do a video documentary where we would post once a month on our website, and it's going to also be in our new Underground Railroad website as well, a mini documentary on African Americans and their perspective on the Civil War. Because what was the Civil War all about? Okay? But basically, when people think about the Civil War, and even African Americans, even our own museum, the Civil War is not given very much attention. But yet it's the most important historical event in this nation's history. It defined us, who we were as a nation, and it made us a unified nation and not just a collection of states. And so the Civil War is extremely important, but we don't really know its importance. And so one of the things that we have done, we have collaborated with the University of Michigan Arts and Citizenship Program, where they send out graduate students to work in museums. And so their graduate students and other interns that we have contracted do the actual research for this project. And that research is then passed on to our media person, the production person, Jennifer Evans, who then develops the scripts, puts together the narration and the music, and produces this really high-quality product once a month that we post. You can take a look at one of those as an example.
Stephen W. Sears, author of Landscape Turned Red, The Battle of Antietam, states, "Of all the days on all the fields where American soldiers have fought, the most terrible by almost any measure was September 17, 1862. The battle waged on that date, close by Antietam Creek at Sharpsburg in western Maryland, took a human toll never exceeded on any other single day in the nation's history. So intense and sustained was the violence," a man recalled, "that for a moment in his mind's eye the very landscape around him turned red." In the summer of 1862, Confederate General Robert E. Lee's army was making its way north through Maryland. On September 17th, the Union and Confederate forces met in Sharpsburg, Maryland. The battle opened in Miller's cornfield when Union General Joseph Hooker began firing on Stonewall Jackson's men. Hooker recalls, "Every stalk in the northern and greater part of the field was cut as closely as could have been done with a knife, and the slain lay in rows precisely as they had stood in their ranks a few moments before. It was never my fortune to witness a more bloody, dismal battlefield." Meanwhile, in the sunken road, Union General W. H. French's division battled with General D. H. Hill's troops. The fighting was so gruesome that the battlefield would later be known as Bloody Lane. Southeast of Sharpsburg, General Ambrose Burnside was attempting to cross a narrow bridge over Antietam Creek. The attempt lasted for 4 hours before the Union troops crossed the bridge and drove back the Georgians. At the end of the day, nearly 23,000 soldiers had died, the most casualties of any single day in the war. Federal losses were numbered at 12,410, and Confederate losses numbered at 10,700. Captain Emory Upton of the 2nd U.S. Infantry states, "I have heard of the dead lying in heaps, but never saw it till this battle. Whole ranks fell together." After the battle, Lee's army retreated south across the Potomac, and the Confederates' first northern campaign was ended. One enslaved onlooker, Hilary Watson, recalls the battle firsthand. "The shells soon begun flying over the house and around here, and while I was out in the yard, there was one that appeared like it went between our house and the next and busted. I could see the blue blaze flying, and I jumped as high as your head." Although the Battle of Antietam was not regarded as a victory for the Union, it instilled enough confidence in Lincoln to proceed with the unveiling of a massively important document. On September 22, 1862, Lincoln issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, which read, that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or any designated part of a state.
Of a project that we're working on. And we're doing this without a budget. we used the resources that we did from the Underground Railroad. The Department of Education gave us money for that. And certainly, but essentially, this is a major project that we probably could have gotten $100,000 for to produce. And we're producing it with a little bit of with nothing. Collaborating certainly with the University of Michigan graduate students and using our staff and using the technology that we have at our disposal. Okay. So that's some of the things that we're doing. A lot more that sort of Lanisha can talk about and Jennifer can talk about, but those are some of two of the key projects that we worked on that relate to the digital humanities. And and I guess the point that I think we really should make is that you can be a small institution. You don't need a lot of money to do some real creative and impactful projects. Thank you.
Nardina Main is manager of archives and library at the Henry Ford Museum. She is a leader in the digital transformation of libraries and archives, in strategic planning, instructional technology, learning commons design, technology implementation, and service excellence. She has an innovative instructional media research agenda and demonstrated success in fundraising and grant writing. Welcome, Nardina.
Thank you, Melinda, and thank you for everyone who's worked to put this conference together. I know it's a lot of work. Some of you may know me from my work at Wayne State University as Director of New Media and Information Technology. And Maria was so kind to mention the Peacock Room project that we did while I was there, and started, I should say, while I was there, and was completed by Wayne State University staff over the past year. It's really an awesome project, and you should take a look at peacockroom.wayne.edu. I'd also like to introduce Alice Engdahl, who's here. She's our digitization manager at the Henry Ford and has really worked to bring all of our digital media together and to publish it on the web, and is our fearless leader in all things digital media. I'd also like to say hi to Julie Thompson-Klein, who, when I was at Wayne, was my mentor and a wonderful person to work with on grants and all kinds of things like that. And I just talked my way through the slides, so I'll just keep going. Today's agenda, I'd like to introduce the Henry Ford to you, talk about collections and digitization at the Henry Ford, talk briefly about internship opportunities, and then we can begin a conversation. So as you know, our organization was founded by Mr. Ford. And it started out, interestingly enough, it began life as the Edison Institute, and it started out as a school. Mr. Ford believed in learning by doing, and he believed in learning from looking at objects and artifacts and seeing how they were made and how things were done. So what ended up happening as a result of this belief in objects and artifacts is that we have this vast collection. And so we have, instead of one spinning wheel, we have 100 spinning wheels. Instead of, one automobile, we have hundreds of automobiles. And we have over 1,000 light bulbs. Just to give you an idea, of course, the Henry Ford was originally named the Edison Institute after Henry Ford's friend and mentor, Thomas Edison. So we do have all those light bulbs. Since then, many people have shaped the organization going forward, and we still have an ambitious collection plan to this day. So we're working our way through a regular budget. We meet every other week to add to the collections. Our goal is to inspire a new generation of innovators, and our belief is that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. In this regard, I'm really excited about turning the Henry Ford into a digital media laboratory so that we can, it's kind of a natural progression to have more students involved in our digitization process. So while you look this over, I will just say that the Henry Ford is really a separate organization from the Ford Motor Company. We certainly got our support and beginnings from a lot of help with the Ford family, but we're separate. We're not a division of Ford Motor. And of our budget, 65% is earned revenue from, we call it the gate. So it's people coming to the museum, to the village, using our venues for events and activities. And so 65% of our budget is from that, and the rest of it comes from memberships and philanthropy. So we do welcome federal grants, and we love that, but that's the only government funding that we receive. So the Henry Ford Museum. How many people have been to the museum? I go there a lot now. You know what we have. I mean, we have the iconic Rosa Parks bus. We have Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion House. We have all kinds of really neat things. The Allegheny locomotive. If you've been in the museum, you've certainly seen that. The Kennedy limousine we do have, as well as the chair in which President Lincoln was assassinated. Again, Greenfield Village. I'm not even going to ask you to raise your hands on this. Some things that we have, certainly we have Mr. Ford's birthplace. We have Thomas Edison's Menlo Park Laboratory, and that's a really cool artifact. I love to go there. We also have the Wright Brothers Home and Cycle Shop, and we have a really interesting archival collection connected with a lot of these objects, but we're working through the Wright Cycle Shop collection right now. Firestone Farm, one of only 6 working roadhouses in America, and the roundhouse. And the roundhouse is where you turn the trains around. They go in and out of their little big train garage, and it actually functions. And you can actually push the train. There's a special lever. You can tell I enjoy myself a lot. We have an IMAX theater. We have the Ford Rouge factory tour, which is amazing. And it talking about bringing the past forward, that's state-of-the-art robotic technology that's being displayed there in the Ford Rouge factory tour. The Benson Ford Research Center is where I hang out. The center is, we consider ourselves a public resource, and we have a lot of ways for you to interact with the collection. I've been talking about some of them in the village and in the museum and the other activities that we have. But the Benson Ford Research Center is the focal point for collections and expertise at the Henry Ford. And so within the Research Center, the curators, archivists, conservators, registrars, collections managers, we all work together to describe and preserve the collections and bring them to the world through digitization. We support information and research requests, group tours, behind-the-scenes access for the media, photography requests, and access to curatorial expertise. We do offer an amazing behind-the-scenes tour program, which I would like to pitch a little bit to you. If you have 15 people, any 15 people that form a group can come in for $10 a piece and go through the Benson Ford Research Center storage areas, which constitute the archives storage area, and our kind of high-tech, temperature-controlled artifact storage as well. And there are amazing things there, and it's really a nice afternoon experience. Our goal in the Benson Ford Research Center is to create new knowledge about the American way of life. So the collections, we've heard that from our colleagues that you really can't put
everything you have on display at any given time, and it can be kind of, I often get questions about certain artifacts that were on exhibit and they're not on exhibit anymore. And that's where the behind-the-scenes tour can help you out, and we can perhaps find that in storage. Our collections document the American experience, and as I mentioned, Henry Ford built the core of the collection, and we have from his collections artifacts that were acquired decades before the 1929 opening in the museum. Our collections contain 26 million items. 1 million of those are material culture artifacts, like statues and objects and artifacts. And then 25 million are archival materials, photographs, documents, films, and digital files. What I have on this page is a couple of really iconic artifacts. You recognize the Kennedy limousine, and the 50th anniversary, believe it or not, is this year. And we are having a week of remembrance starting on November 18th, so November 18th to the 22nd is the JFK Remembrance Week at the Henry Ford. The other letter, you can't read it, and I wish you could, but it's basically Abraham Lincoln's letter to Nathan Sargent, who was head of the Republican, I guess the equivalent would be head of the Republican National Committee at the time, in 1860. And Mr. Lincoln basically says in this letter that the Republican platform must contain the anti-slavery plank, that we will not compromise, that it has to be there. And it's just such a brave letter and wonderful. 5% of our collection is on exhibit at any given time. Our digitization initiative, I feel really silly standing up here talking about this when Ellis is the person who's really running it, but I'll do my best. And she can talk to you about it afterwards and give you the real deal. Our digitization initiative is an institution-wide effort, and basically every single person in the Historical Resources Department focuses on this work. It's integrated into our exhibition schedule, and we also integrate digitization with exhibition planning so that when people come to the museum and see something on the floor, they can also go online and find more views of the artifact, the archival materials that are related, and all kinds of other media available to them. We have a number of imaging streams that create digital records for our collections. You can see the things that we do. We have scanning, artifact photography. We have a copy stand that captures bigger documents, or things like glass negatives, which are a little bit hard to do with a flat copy stand. So things that need a little bit more work. And then, of course, cataloging and conservation and collections management are all part of our digitization process, and we work together as a team to work our way through that. I'm sure that you've all heard about library, archive, museum collaboration in the digital space. And I had done that with the Peacock Room and with some other projects before I went to the Henry Ford. And I will say that it's really interesting to be in an institution that has a library, an archive, and a museum all together, as well as a village, which is the Living History Museum. I don't know if it's easier or harder, more difficult to collaborate in that space, probably easier. But I will say that I think it's a really neat kind of experience to have, and something that I think can really move this LAM, the concept of library, archive, museum collaboration forward, and something that we will all be doing more of. These are you can't really get any idea of the colors here, but these are the Susan McCord Crazy Quilts. Susan McCord was a farmer's wife in Mid-America in the 19th century. She did a whole series of quilts, and we have a lot of them at the Henry Ford, and they're very world famous and wonderful. And they're being added, by the way, into the Quilt Index, the Michigan Quilt Index, so that you can see those online, as well as in our collection management system. I believe there were about 20 some of these quilts in our collection. I obviously prefer the crazy quilts because they were designed kind of in a free-form way according to her own aesthetic and her way of putting together color and stitches, and I think they're amazing. You should realize that Susan McCord did not have electricity, so she did these by daylight or by kerosene lamp. And so all these little hand stitches were done by hand, and I think it's wonderful. Our fellowships and internships, we have a variety of things available for students, and we enjoy working with students and faculty very much. We'd like to invite you all to work with us. This year we had 3 Simmons interns for the summer who worked on reinterpreting the Adams House in the Village, and we're still working on that. The students worked in the curatorial department, in conservation and in collections management, orchestrating an exhibition and reinterpreting a building that's just, it's this choreography of moving things in and out of storage and going to storage and looking at, is this the right object for the reinterpretation? And so there was the collections management work. All the work on this was substantial, but we have to give a big thumbs up to our collections management department. By the way, the Simmons internship, you can go to the website and find out about that. And that is a paid internship. The other paid opportunity we have is the Henry Austin Clark Travel to Collections grant program. So each year the endowment funds 2 fellows to conduct research at the Benson Ford Research Center. And it's usually that we pay their travel expenses. And so our 2 fellows this year are from Chicago and the UK. We also provide practicum in concert with academic programs, and we have all sorts of opportunities available. We're pretty flexible, 1 semester, 2 semesters, calendar year. We like people to stay so that you can get this broad experience. In addition to paid internships, we provide volunteer internships for students who are interested in gaining experience in the field. We bring people in for a volunteer internship so that they are treated as a volunteer. So you get the badge that allows you to go into the museum and the village for free and bring in your 4 of your people who would accompany you. We also give a free lunch, believe it or not. That's not a joke. So we also provide an overview of the institution and introductions to key staff throughout the museum so that we try to provide a broad experience for students, a broad professional experience. Oh, this is the monkey bar, and it's one of my favorite objects. The monkey bars were made often by prisoners who were passing the time in their incarceration period, and this is no different than that. This was carved by a gentleman. The monkeys in the monkey bar are carved from peach pits, so there are a lot of peach pits because there are a lot of monkeys in this. And the detail is amazing. Please go online and look at the monkey bar. It's great. The purpose of this was to kind of show all the types of ways that people could be led to a path of crime, and to show Mr. Ford, this was sent to Mr. Ford, and to show him that this particular prisoner had learned his lesson. And so there's like gambling here, there's gluttony, there's all sorts of debauchery and drug taking and all kinds of terrible things. So it's really interesting. And the detail is amazing, down to the little piles of ash that are underneath the cigars. it's pretty cool. So, by the way, the story of this prisoner is that he did go straight after prison, and Mr. Ford employed him in Massachusetts in one of his facilities. So he turned out well. The other artifact is a letter from Clyde Champion Barrow, Bonnie and Clyde fame. And basically, the letter thanks Mr. Ford for the V8 engine. And I wish I could remember the exact passage, but he basically says that, thank you for the car. I really always drive Fords when I can get away with one. So, I think it was shortly after this letter was written that he died in the gunfight with federal agents, but he did get this off before that happened. So we have a handout of our internship opportunities, and Ellis, who will wave her hand at you, it looks like this. Please pick one up. Also, if you don't get a handout or you want to talk to me about internships and opportunities, please write to me at dinaM@thehenryford.org, and I would be glad to talk to you. Students, faculty, everyone, please look me up. I have to show you my favorite object. This is our 1956 Thunderbird, and it's on the floor right now. If you want to just really enjoy yourself looking at a beautiful thing. And I just would like to invite you all to begin the conversation. So, thank you.
So our final speaker is Adam Lovell, and Adam has managed historical artifacts and archival collections at museums in 5 states as well as New Zealand. He is currently the curator of collections at the Detroit Historical Society, managing more than 250,000 items related to the city's rich past. Adam has been charged with the exciting task of providing increased access to the collections by way of this digitization project. And these efforts are part of the Detroit Historical Society's Past Forward campaign, which is currently underway. So welcome, Adam.
I'm kind of tall. Is that better? Okay, really quick, a little bit about the Detroit Historical Society. If you've not been, you should go. There we go. Up until about 10 years ago, the Historical Society was a city department, the Detroit Historical Commission, dating all the way back to the 1920s. And when the city ran into some financial trouble, they were going to close the museum, the zoo, the Charles H. Wright, and the DIA are in similar situations. The Historical Society took over the operations of the museum. So the reason that that's important is because we're a very old museum, but we're a very young institution. We're only about 10 years old. So as far as doing our own development, doing our own leadership management, completely being on our own, we're a fairly young institution, but we've had these sort of these sacred cows that have been around for so long, our museums, our exhibits, our membership base, and just Detroit history in general. So about 3 years ago, we started this massive campaign, the Past Forward campaign, to raise $21 million. And most of that was going towards exhibits, but some facility upgrades. Unfortunately, there was really no one in on the front end to kind of integrate some digital technologies into that expansion, much like what the Henry Ford and what Bob was talking about at the Charles H. Wright. It was a missed opportunity, but I think we made the best of it. Out of that $21 million, we were thrilled because we got $300,000 just for digitization. So, small drop in the bucket. But kind of also what Bob was talking about, talk about doing the most bang for your buck. So we used our existing technology, our existing staff, got a little bit of grant funds, invested in some equipment, and also some personnel, and I think we made a pretty good run with what we had to work with. So I'm just going to talk for a little bit, and then I'll kind of show you some of the things that we have done. So, really quick, the Detroit Historical Society operates 3 separate facilities: the Detroit Historical Museum, the Dawson Great Lakes Museum, and also our Collections Resource Center, which is located on the grounds of historic Fort Wayne in Detroit. We do have a collection of about 250,000 items, and I'm jealous of all the other museums that have talked, because we don't display 12%, we don't display 5%, we display 1%. We only have about 250 or 2,500 actual artifacts on display at any one time. Most of that's in collections. So, even better need to increase our digital presence to get everything out and about. And that doesn't include, that number, by the way, doesn't include photographs, archival documents, and our library, which is probably an equal number, totaling probably around 500,000 total items. The institution has around 50 staff members, some part-time, some full-time, but we have no IT staff. We have one contractor that comes in and installs software and fixes bugs and backs up the server and things like that. But we really don't have anyone on staff that can interpret some of these complex issues. We don't really have any techies around, so we have to go with what we know. We're all historians. We don't know anything about computers. But like I said, we do the best we can. We did get a grant for $150,000 from the Institute of Museum and Library Services through their Museums for America program. That was a huge boost. Again, we got a little bit of extra money from our comprehensive campaign to do this 3-year digitization project. Our first goal was around 70,000 items to get available online and accessible to the public. One of the things that we had to do early on, and Melinda was talking about how digital humanities is this broad term that you can't define, and I really do think that that's great, overall in the field. But when it comes down to dealing with administrators and fundraisers and everyone in your institution, you have to define what digitization means, because if you have 5 people at the table, it means 5 different things. So one of the first things that we had to do was define what digitization meant to us, and I was fortunate enough to kind of phrase that definition to work towards my advantage. So we had this 5-step process, which involved inventory, find out what the heck do we have first of all, then the actual physical capture, whether it's photographing, scanning, etc. Data entry, so that we can increase the metadata around what we have. Rehousing, that way I can get some money for new boxes, new folders, new sleeves, all these great archival supplies that we're always short on. And then lastly, access. Not only online access, but access in the museum and access, physically in the archive. So if we want to physically go get a photograph, we can go do that as well. So by having that 5-step process, we were able to, get a lot more than what we could. I think the administrators kind of thought, well, just buy a scanner, stick it on the scanner, scan it at 300 and call it good. It's like, no, we're going to do a lot more than that. So by defining, what digitization meant for this project, really helped us out a lot. The equipment and the staffing and supplies that we got, were great. It was a good investment, especially the equipment, because even once this 3-year project is over, we'll still be able to continue on some degree. Lastly, we designed the project with the end user in mind. Museums, especially history museums, are notorious for, it's whatever the curator thinks is important. If the curator thinks that a certain battle of the Civil War is important, well, that's the battle that you're going to learn about, by God, because he thinks it's important. But that's not always what the public wants. So we really did a lot of research, went out to school groups, talked with teachers, talked with our membership base, talked to researchers who had used our collection, as well as staff members, to find out what do we need in this digital collection, what types of things do we need to start with, and how do we want to make it accessible, what kind of information needs to be there. So by having all that information, it really helped us out getting the grant. because the reviews that we got back from IMLS were like, we've never seen anyone who spent this much time, finding out exactly what their audience wanted, and then formed a project specifically around that. So that was a huge bump and was almost a shoe-in for a really competitive grant to get, especially now that funding has been cut on the federal level. The system that we use for collections management is called Past Perfect. And if you're not a museum or an archives person, you probably have never heard of that software before. But it is the most widely used museum software in the world, especially for mid-sized and small museums. It's pretty good. It's very affordable. That's why so many museums like it, and it's pretty dang powerful for the price that you get. And because it's so widely used, it's very transferable. We've transferred records to other museums that have done loans, that we deal with doing loans, and the information just transfers wonderfully. There is a support option. You have to pay for it, but again, not having an IT person on staff, we really couldn't invest in some sort of larger, technological, CMS type system because we didn't have anyone to manage it, and so we would have had to pay even more money to have support to come in to manage that. One of the great things about this, when we started to do digitization, they do have an add-on that allows you to basically just take your database and put it online. Once again, the number one advantage of this is that it's cheap and it already works with our existing technology. So we didn't have to learn new programs, we didn't have to learn new software, we didn't have to learn to program anything. All we have to do is push a button and the stuff magically appears online. I don't know, one of you can maybe tell me how that happens, I don't know. But all I know is I push the button, it shows up on the web, and I love it. Once again, you have the support and it's affordable. The biggest downside, though, is it's not very customizable. You open up the box, you install the software, and it's ready to go. But it's pretty basic. You get to choose. Do you want red, blue, or purple, colors? And do you want the stuff at the top or do you want it at the bottom? That's pretty much all the customization you can get. Any of the Past Perfect Onlines that you go to see, and they have a list of all of them on their website, the company website, they all kind of look the same. You can tell when you see it that it's Past Perfect Online. One of the things that we were able to do, this is our website here. You can kind of see what it looks like. So this green bar at the top, the text, everything. But if you look at the URL, detroithistorical.org, that's our URL. So I come down here to view the collection, it comes up. There it goes. So it kind of looks like we're in the same website, but if you look at the URL, a completely different spot. We're back down in Past Perfect land here. So we were able to work with the vendor that developed our website, got them in touch with the Past Perfect Online folks and said, all right, you guys talk, do your magic, and see how you can make this a more seamless operation so that it looks like you're still on our page and everything links back. If you click home or you click our logo out here, it takes you right back to our main website. So it was great that we were able to at least make it look like it's part of our collection. And it's pretty simple. It has a general keyword search that almost everyone uses, and you go from there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into some of the detailed things that we were doing. So once again, we're looking for the most bang for our buck. So some of the things that we were able to do, biographical info. We wanted to make this more than just, right, here's a picture of something in our collection, look at it if you want. So I can find the right one. Why is he searching for Martin Van Buren? So, for instance, if you happen to be doing your research, this is great because it's a primary document. It's actually a letter written by Lewis Cass, very famous Michigander, Detroiter, but it's addressed to then President Martin Van Buren regarding this guy James Witherell. It's like, okay, big deal. Okay, so we can see this. You click on it. You see a larger version. So you can actually read the primary document. So this is great. We actually have school lesson plans and teacher focus groups that are kind of evolving around developing teaching resources using primary documents. I mean, I was already like a sophomore in college before I really learned about using primary documents. Now we're teaching this to 8th graders. So it's a huge advantage to just the field of learning history in general. But what's so neat about just the kind of static, this is the object, is we have these people down here. So we can click on the different people. For instance, we want to know who the heck is James Witherell. Does anyone know? I didn't think so. So we click on that, and all of a sudden we come up with this biographical page. And this is all done inside of our website. Stuff we already had, but now it's become available to the masses. So we know, hey, here's where he was born. Here's different things that he did. Well, look at this. He was involved in the Revolutionary War. So now we have all this great information about who this guy was. And it's right there available on the internet. Now, for instance, if we do the same thing with Lewis Cass, we see all of his information. Here's his mugshot. Then down here, associated records. Wonder what else we have in the collection related to Lewis Cass. Well, all kinds of stuff, including the key to his mausoleum. Don't ask. The cane that he used. So some really neat artifacts that that you can see the detail of the cane. So just kind of a neat resource that actually has become a research tool. And again, when we started this project, no one really used the biographical file at all. First ones, if not the only ones, to another thing we were able to do, just using this technology by figuring out how it worked and say how can we make it work in our advantage, is to do crowdsourcing. And this was a totally new territory for us. We were a little bit anxious. Once again, it's that whole protective curator thing. We don't want anyone else to tell us what we're doing or how we're doing it wrong. But by doing some crowdsourcing, if I can find it. I had all these things already brought up on my computer, so I'm doing them in reverse now. We have a collection when the Packard Motor Company closed in '59. We have a large collection of photographs that we got from them. And they're really great photos, anywhere from famous people who own Packards. This is some sort of a movie set, cowboys all around their Packard car. Pictures of the Packard Proving Grounds. There's about 6,000 images. But we're not car experts, specifically for Packards. A lot of these cars are concept vehicles or prototypes. So even if we did all the research, we still might not be able to identify what some of these vehicles are, who some of these people are, because none of the photographs were labeled. They were in boxes, literally in the dumpster, and we went and salvaged them. So it's a great resource, but we don't know what's there. But there are Packard clubs in all 50 states, including here in Detroit, and these guys are absolutely fanatics about Packards. And so, okay, here's this wealth of knowledge. How do we tap into it? So since there's not much information, this is basically all we have. Photo of a Packard being serviced during a stop at a test track. Well, which test track is it? What kind of the Packard is it? What year is it? So we put this little thing down at the bottom. So please help us improve our collection by providing information. Click the feedback link above. And all that does, it sends an email to a designated email that we have back at DHS that says, hey, I know where that is. That's the Packard Proving Grounds, in Warren. And that's a 1935 Model 6 or whatever. So it's just a really simple way, just using email, using the features that are already in the software and the programs that we have, that we're able to get some crowdsourced information for the Packard collection. Also using social media. Once again, we never really had much of a social media presence, so getting into things like Facebook, Twitter. We have a blog page called Look What We Found, which is really kind of neat. It's literally, you find something really cool in the collection one day in a box, and hey, I think we did Lewis Cass's mausoleum key at one time. So just neat things. There's a piece of Henry Ford's wedding cake in the collection, too. I don't know how that got there. So just neat things. We also have a Tumblr page that comes out almost daily. Again, just highlights from the collection. So what have we been able to do with this so far? Obviously, we've increased the accessibility of the collection and made it more available to a larger audience. It's been a little bit of a revenue generator as well. Lots of people are doing documentaries on Detroit, on the region, on writing books, doing articles. We've even had places, there's a new Bagger Dave's restaurant opening up in downtown Detroit. And if you've ever been to a Bagger Dave's, all their decor is decorated with sort of historic photos and memorabilia from the area where they're located. Well, we sold them 1,000 photographs. So they're able to use those to decorate their restaurant. So it's great revenue generating and gets the collection out and actually gets it being used. Increased staff usage. Probably the single largest user of the online collection is the collection staff, because it actually searches faster than the internal database sometimes. So we use it quite a lot, and also other staff members as well. Our Collections Resource Center is physically separated 7 miles away from our museum, which is where everyone else is housed. So if you're in marketing or development and you're like, oh gosh, I wish I had an old picture of Detroit just to put on this flyer, or to to do something with, or to put on a website, or an email to somebody who's really interested in the old J.L. Hudson's building. Well, that would really make his day. Well, now they can actually get it right off our website, or at least know what's in our collection. So increased staff awareness has been a huge bonus that was totally unintended, but it's a neat outcome. Some of the teacher lesson plans that I talked about, using primary documents for students of all ages. Also researchers, we looked at the biographical files, how that's become an integral part. A lot of people have seen what's in the collection and have called us up and said, hey, I see you have this and this and this. I want to come make a visit and see what else you have that's not on the web yet. We have about 22,000 records online so far, so we have a ways to go to meet that 70,000 goal. And this last one, this is something that we're just now in the process of doing. We're calling it the Cognitive Memory Project. We're partnering with caregiver groups of Alzheimer and dementia patients to use some of these historic photographs of places that Detroit citizens, residents, would have remembered. Downtown, going to Belle Isle, Boblow Park, being on the boats, being on the river, to use them to help kind of jog their memory, kind of help them remember some things. And it's a really great exercise. A lot of other places are doing it, but not many places have actually partnered with museums. So we're not asking any money. We just want to make sure it's aware as a resource for those out there. It'd be great to get a grant to get some touch screens out to nursing homes and caregiving facilities to make this more accessible. Just a great little kind of feel-good project, and we're excited about it. It's just now getting off the ground, but we want to find other audiences, sort of missed opportunities to say, hey, here's something that our collection could actually be used in a way that we hadn't thought of before. So that's one of the main things I want to get out of this weekend, and dealing with other people and using what our existing network of colleagues to find out what are those audiences? How else can we use this stuff? Because we scan all this, we put it online, do all this effort, and who uses it? We want to make sure it gets used as best we can. So, in short, where do we go from here? We're trying to attract those new audiences and identify where those collections can be used. We've mainly been doing photographs and documents so far. We would like to expand more to do three-dimensional artifacts. Of course, there's 250,000 of them, so that's quite a lot. And also our AV collection. We have some great audiovisual materials that we really have no idea. I mean, we don't have a handle on that whatsoever. It's probably the least known about collection at DHS. And then what else can we do? What are we not thinking of? Being that we're not in tune to current digital trends, current software and hardware and availability. What are some things that we're missing out on? We know that we're missing out on it. How do we get that information to us in a usable fashion? It takes all of our extra time and effort just to keep abreast of what's going on with history, and current history especially, now that it seems to be changing daily, if not weekly, in the Southeast Michigan region. So we just don't have the effort to keep up with what are these new technologies, what are new avenues to do. And so how do we do it? Those are the big questions. So I think that is all of those. Another thing I'll show you, there is an advanced search function on Passport Online. So for instance, if you wanted to search for Belle Isle, but you only wanted to search in the 1920s, still probably going to bring up a lot of stuff. It'll probably bring up mostly postcards. But it's kind of a neat feature. So we have all kinds of postcards, photographs. It's fairly nice. We do, here we go. We do some sheet music. And I think, this actually, we're actually scanning this various sheet music to actually put it online. And we actually have two versions, by the way. This is the new marketing people are in the room. I was a little bit opposed to this. I don't know really what I think about it now, but there's actually two versions of Pass Perfect Online. One that's just for DHS members. So if you're a member of DHS, you can go and log in, enter your membership ID, and you actually get access to higher resolution images than you would on just the public site. Now, this isn't bad. I mean, you can still zoom in and get all the detail that you want for the most part, but it's not a large enough file that you'll be able to capture it and publish it into a book or really do much with. It would be a little bit grainy if you tried to print it. And the high resolutions are also watermarked, so again, you can't do a whole lot with it, but you can get access to really high resolution images if you're a member. And we have had researchers that call up and say, hey, I'm really interested in this and this and this, but the clarity is not that great. It says, well, for a membership. And we have, got a few memberships that way, so it's a neat little development thing that we've been able to do. So that's pretty much what DHS is doing. Again, our motto is more bang for your buck. So that's all I have.
We do have some time for questions right now. I was wondering if you could please invite you to sit up at the table. And I think we have some microphones also.
Hello. Thanks for a wonderful series of presentations. I had a question for the people who represent institutions, museums who've just presented. Do you know of any focus on geospatial archives, on ways of combining some of the artifacts that you guys have in your collections, photographs, documents, even music, and putting those into sort of conversation with either current or historic maps to kind of draw out the history of the Detroit and Dearborn region?
Oh, glad you asked that question. Yes, on the Underground Railroad website that we're going to be launching in a few months, we have a geospatial map on historical events connected with the Underground Railroad and sites, historical sites or events. And so basically, if you go to that page, you can go to a timeline, you click on it, and it actually takes you to the Google Map site of where that location is. And then once you get into Google Maps, you can then navigate that area. And there's an entry, and on some occasions there may be a historical image associated with that as well. So that's one of the resources that's on the that's going to be on the new Underground Railroad website. That's the last page that we have been working on, so we're still trying to tweak it. There's some things that we're doing to it. But yes, we have that on this new Underground Railroad site. And here again, all of that that data is driven or fed from our maps, our content management system.
We're not doing things specifically with maps, but the geolocation that we're just beginning to test a little bit, so this is very new, relates to mobile devices and being able to, for the network to know your location in relation to an object and to be able to deliver information to your mobile device that way. But nothing is yet related to mapping, although that's something that we're certainly exploring and are interested in.
As far as the permanent collection at the museum, I don't think we've initiated anything like that, but in the library we're considering proposing an exhibition of these Piranesi books that we have. Piranesi was an artist and an architect who was active in the mid-1750s, and we have a complete collection of reproductions of his plates that were printed in Paris in 1835. So one of the ideas that we were considering is, since many of the plates are of actual places in Rome of the time, to do something like that, almost like a before and after type project.
And I know Past Perfect does have a mapping add-on that you can purchase that works with, I can't remember the program, like Microsoft Maps or something like that. So you'd have to buy that program as well. We did look into, we did look into it. I don't know how it works with the online version though. But basically, yeah, if you had, like, say, the Belle Isle sheet music, you could somehow tag that or link that to Belle Isle.
Given that the name of this meeting is Network Detroit, I wonder if you could comment on the feasibility of a genuinely network relationship among these wonderful individual examples. Robert Smith spoke of the problem of silos, and what you have are some beautiful individual projects that are so important for Detroit. I'm thinking of other models like Network California and Network Pacific Northwest. What are your thoughts about how feasible that might be, or as you now sit there next to each other, more interaction with these individual collections?
I'll start out on that one. I think one of the things that this meeting itself has kind of shown me is that we all have items in our collections that interrelate. And I think the digital humanities really is a multi-institutional effort that allows collections to relate to one another and objects in the collections to form kind of new exhibitions. And so I think that just listening to the different museums that we've heard from today, I think it's a real possibility and a really rich idea. And I think maybe Melinda had this goal when she brought us all together. So
I know that since we've started our digitization project, I've probably been contacted by 8 or 10 different organizations that are basically collaborative. Oh, give your digital stuff to us, and we'll include it in our database. And some of it's national, regional, some of it's focused on folk art, and we haven't taken advantage of any of those yet because we just need to figure out, first of all, how can we do it, and what's the feasibility, what kind of intellectual control do we have over the items. But I know there's lots of different groups out there doing it, none that I know of specifically in Detroit. So whoever wants to take that on, give me a call.
So our next panel is at 11. It's in another building, so I think we may only have time for one more question, but you're going to be around today, so we can continue the discussion later.
Melinda, could you tell us briefly how to get to the next one?
Okay, we're going to go out the glass doors. Right here, you're going to go out the door, turn left, and then it's just the building right across the way, and I can leave it right there.
There are also signs in front of the building.
Yeah, there's signs in front of the building.
We'll be going in that door, and then you'll go down a set of stairs to the first floor.
Everything is close at Lawrence Tech.
Very small.
Hello. So this kind of, I guess, follows on a little bit from Julie's question and about the challenges of networking. And I was wondering, to what extent those of you, all of you, have thought about APIs, application programming interfaces, for your. This is actually coming out of a Twitter conversation we were just having about basically making application programming interfaces for your digital collections so that other people can access them. And I understand there's resource and knowledge constraints for some of you, but I was wondering to what extent you thought about this as a way of promoting generative access to your collections.
Well, that's certainly one of our primary goals, is to allow the larger community to have access to our collection, at the same time protecting the intellectual rights of some of our donors, as well as assisting the museum with finding out ways that it can monetize and its collection to help pay for some of the cost of running these digital systems. But my approach is that we should provide as much access as we can, and that's one of the reasons we selected the content management system that we did, because it's simple, it's powerful, it's easy to use, and we're probably going to first start providing access to other institutions, to scholars who are writing. We're going to give them some limited access directly to our content management system to use some of our resources. So that's part of our goal in the long term. Ultimately, we may be able to manage our system in such a way where we can provide general access to the entire community directly to the digital assets themselves, as opposed to just going to our pre-packaged material that we have on the website. The Charles Wright has a huge object collection, and I would say, as with the DHS, that most of that material has never been seen by the public. So one of our long-term goals is to digitize our object collection and to make that information accessible to the larger public as well. So certainly that's the direction that we're moving towards. That's why we established the online system. One of the things that has happened is, we all know that as the digital world has evolved, people have quickly began to realize that content is king, and they want to control that content. And sometimes that content is actually free content, and people are taking content that's really in the public domain, and they're finding ways to monetize it and to protect it. Certainly at the Charles Wright, at least I don't personally believe that we should be doing that. I think that we're public institutions, we're nonprofits, and we have an obligation, a mission, to make our materials as accessible to the public as possible.
I'd like to just say that I'd like to agree with the idea that Bob has just so eloquently spoken of that we hold these materials in the public trust, and we should share them. We, in our Maker Faire event this August, we had a hackathon, and we invited people from around the area to hack the collection site. And a number of APIs were formed on that day, and we continue to have active discussions about how to make that a kind of a permanent feature of our collection site, but those discussions are ongoing. We also have people who have contacted us and who are interested in writing APIs on our site, and some pretty useful ideas. So, yeah, we're actively exploring that at this time.
So I hate to interrupt this, but I think we're going to have to move on to the management building. So thank you very much. Thank you so much.